Ahead and get started. So first, I just wanted to start by saying welcome. My name is Ashley Forrest. I'm the Director of Career Services here at National University. And today we're going to talk about federal and traditional resumes and kind of talk through the differences, best practices related to them. And National University, for those that aren't aware, was recently awarded a grant through the VA department. And this workshop is brought to you through that grant. Our hope is to expand our offerings to our military-connected community and provide some resources and education across the board. So without further ado, I will go ahead and turn it over to Denise Ingledo Lopez, who is our certified professional resume writer here in Career Services at National University.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I am going to go ahead and get started. Here are some of the discussion topics we will be talking about today. We're going to talk about first and foremost, reading the job description, resume content, the tone and the language for the different types of resumes, the formatting and length for the different types, common mistakes, and some final tips. So let's go ahead and move on. Okay, one thing that's going to be really important for federal government roles is that you meet 100% of the qualifications. That's mandatory. So reading the description in full ensures that you're going to meet the criteria and customize your resume accordingly so that you're avoiding any wasted effort on any roles that you're not eligible for. And non-federal roles, it's very similar. Recruiters that we've spoken with say that you should have at least 80% of the qualifications. You need to be qualified for the role for which you're applying. Reviewing the job description helps you focus on the roles where you're a strong fit, saving time and tailoring your resume only for the relevant opportunities. So by reading the job description first, you're going to avoid wasting time and you're going to maximize your chances of success with well-targeted applications. Very, very important. Okay, so for instance, I'm going to go ahead and show you a federal job description here for an emergency management specialist. And as you're going to see here, it has a summary. There might be a few words in here, like LIDAR, flood modeling, GIS innovations, those kind of things. That's going to be important. And it tells you what the job is open to. So make sure you read this because you may or may not be eligible to apply for this role depending on what this job is open to. Okay. And then it talks about the duties. These are the things that you'll be doing in the role. Okay. And then it talks about requirements. Again, this is kind of your eligibility information again. Then the qualifications, it goes in here in depth about the qualifications. Very, very important to read through very carefully to make sure that you are qualified for this role. And then there's some people that, there's some jobs that may show that you can substitute some of your work experience for your education, which is going to be great. And if you are applying for the job based on your education versus experience, then you're going to need to make sure that you follow the instructions very carefully in the job description. Okay. And then it talks about how you're going to be evaluated. And these are some key words right here that you're going to want to make sure that you place in your resume. Okay, just incorporate it within your resume. There are a couple of ways to do that, and I'll show you that later on in this presentation. Okay, and then again, required documents. These are things that must be completed and attached along with your resume when you are applying. It tells you how to apply and who the contact person is. So that's all going to be very, very important when you are applying. So before you even start filling out an application or creating a resume, this is what you need to do first. Make sure you read that job description. So at most importance. Okay. Now with a traditional role or a non-federal role, then, wherever it is that you find your job description, here we're using Handshake for an example, you want to also go through and read through the overview to see if there are any keywords in there, what you'll be doing, the qualifications, and so on. Okay, making sure that you do qualify at least 80% and that you do have the must-haves. Because if you don't have the must-haves, they're probably not going to really be looking at your resume for very long. I know that sounds really harsh, but it's very true. Very important to make sure that your resume is tailored towards the job description in both cases, but with federal jobs, it's just a little bit more stringent. Okay, so starting at the top on the header section of a federal resume, it's going to be a little different than on a traditional resume. The federal resume is going to have more information about if you're a US citizen, if you're looking for full-time permanent availability, where the desired location is, the position title, the announcement number, and the GS level that you're applying for. So again, that's where reading that job description is going to come in really handy because you need to be able to determine what GS level you're going to be applying for, because sometimes it'll have a range like GS 9, GS 11. So making sure that you're applying for the correct GS level. And then with a traditional resume, what you're going to need to have is just your contact information, your phone number, your email. It's great to have your LinkedIn profile because whenever recruiters or employers are trying to narrow down who they're going to forward on, sometimes they're going to look for additional information to be able to find anything that's going to set you apart from the other candidates. So very important to use LinkedIn profile. And then of course your city and state here with your zip code. Whereas with the federal resume, you want to spell out your entire address. Okay. With the federal resume, you're going to want to talk a little bit about if you have a current role with the federal government, what that is and what level it is, and if you have any veterans preferences. So that's all going to be really important. Now, with a traditional resume, rather than putting the position title and the announcement number and the GS level, you're just going to put the targeted title that you're applying for. Okay. This is going to help the employer understand what role it is that you're applying for. Okay, without having to try to read through your entire resume to try to guess what that is. Okay, now the summary section on the federal resume is going to be a little bit different than the traditional resume as well. The federal resume includes your knowledge, your abilities, your experience tied directly to that federal job announcement built from your experience section of the resume. Okay. It focuses on qualifications that meet specific federal hiring requirements. This language is formal and precise. It really just details the candidate's, details how the candidate aligns with the job. Now, as you're going to notice, there is a technical proficiency or a skills section on the traditional resume, whereas there is not one in the federal. That's because skills or competencies are integrated into the experience section where they hold more weight and are more detailed with federal jobs. Okay. Now, a traditional resume has either what's called a value proposition or a summary. And that's going to be dependent upon your level of expertise and your experience. If you're highly experienced in that field that you're going into, then you'll want to create a value proposition, basically sharing what you bring to the table, including any accomplishments that you have. But if you're not as experienced and you're going to rely more on your education, then you're going to create a summary. Basically, this is a concise, impactful statement that's going to highlight, again, what you bring to the table, accomplishments pretty much for the value proposition as well, and any goals. But again, your targeted role is going to be up there already in where your contact information is. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time on what your goals are here because it really needs to be employer centric, what it is you're planning to do for that employer or what you hope to do for that employer versus what you want to gain out of it. Okay. The traditional resume focuses on standing out in the private sector in a marketing-oriented approach, whereas with federal, it's more detailed. Okay. And then you're going to want to list your competencies or your job-related skills or technologies if you're in a highly technical industry in short phrases or bullet points, kind of like what this technical proficiency is for the cybersecurity role. Okay, examples like Python, Jira, Confluence. These are just under the brief paragraph to provide recruiters with a quick snapshot of your qualifications. But both federal and traditional summaries are based on the experience section of the resume in alignment with the job description. So it's best to start with the experience section before crafting your summary. Okay, so here's the education section for a federal resume. It's a lot more detailed. It includes your degree names, your university details, graduation dates, GPA if above 3.5, academic honors like Dean's List, and any awards. It could be scholarships or anything like that as well, or any club activities or club involvement. The most relevant coursework and the most relevant projects as it relates to the job announcement need to be on here. So any projects that you've completed while you were in school, that can help bridge the experience gap in and do it in a way that shows what it was that you did, how you did it, or what tools, methods, or technologies did you use, and then the skills and the knowledge gained from that experience that helps to showcase those skills that might not be in your experience section. And that helps to bridge that gap. For a traditional resume, it's usually not as detailed, okay? It shares similar content and formatting practices with the federal resume, but the key difference is that the traditional resumes prioritize projects over coursework, whereas with federal resumes, you want to include your coursework and your projects. Okay. As you gain experience, say around 2 or 3 years of experience, the emphasis shifts from your GPA, if it's above 3.5, and your honors and your scholarships and your club activities to your work experience, which becomes the primary focus on a traditional resume. Now, your projects are going to be listed with their own section instead of under education section here on this particular resume, but that's because these projects were completed outside of traditional coursework. These projects he did on his own. He went through Forage and he went through ethical hacking boot camp, if I could speak today. So that's why this particular person's projects are listed below the education. But typically, if it's within your education for which you did these projects, then you're going to put them under the degree for which they were done. Okay, and it's usually just your most recent, education. So again, once you've gained 2 to 3 years of professional experience, the education section should be moved below the experience section. as it highlights relevant work experience, which becomes more important oftentimes than academic credentials. Okay. And it provides a logical flow for recruiters focusing on practical accomplishments. They like to see your accomplishments and what you've done hands-on within the context of your experience versus your education. But again, that's only after you've had a little bit more experience, about 2 to 3 years of experience. Otherwise, you want to stick with keeping your education on top. So here's an example of an experience section for the federal resume. There's about 3 different ways you can do this for the federal resume. But first and foremost, the federal resume provides full details of each job. This is your application, and this oftentimes can be your interview. So you want to make sure that you're putting as much detail in this as possible, as long as you're not, repeating too much, of course. This is going to include your position title and whatever level you are, whether it's GS, ES, OS, whatever level, and any step that you might be. It's going to include your supervisor's name, their contact information, the hours that you've worked per week for that role, and your salary for that role. Okay, very important. I know there are some states that that's not required, but for the federal government, sometimes they say the federal government trumps the state laws. So in this case, that's true. So unless they specifically say not to add your salary, add your salary. Okay. Now, bullets are tied to the skills mentioned within the job description. Remember how we looked at those, how you will be evaluated, that section of the job description? Some of those job descriptions will have that and some won't. But those are the key words that you want to look at. So you might want to, one way of doing that is to separate out your experience by those skills. Okay, or by the most common skills, or the most the skills that are most commonly mentioned within that job description, if it's not in the how you will be evaluated. Okay, so then after you separate them out by the skills, then you're going to go ahead and put those job experiences in with more extensive details. What was done, how it was done, and why or what was the result. Okay, and it's very similar to a traditional in that respect right there for your bullets. But the traditional resume is a little bit more metrics driven. Okay. And the traditional federal resume is more detail oriented. Jobs are, again, often broken down by the specific skills as subheadings and capitalized so that the recruiter can quickly find them in this example. And it uses a more formal tone, okay? Now, here's another way the federal resume can be written in the experience section. You can just capitalize those key words that are within the job descriptions. Okay, that highlights them and draws the recruiter's attention, and it makes key skills very easy to locate within the context of the experience and streamlines the recruiter's search for specific qualifications. Okay, it may look kind of weird to read that way. I prefer, if you're going to do it, to separate them out. It just makes it easier to read. But that's another way to do it. And it's shown within the context of the role that you, of the task that you were doing. So that's what they're looking for. They want to see your skills within the context of your employment. Now, another way that you could do it, and it's a little bit more disjointed, but it looks more organized. Skills are placed separately below the corresponding experience bullets. This allows recruiters to identify the skills that were used very quickly, but it doesn't place the skills in the experience direct context, making it slightly harder to connect the dots and connect with those specific achievements. So there's 3 different ways that you can do this in the experience section for the federal resume. But again, it's really your preference. I myself like separating them out by category, especially if you have a large amount of text. Now, with a traditional resume, you don't have to do any of that, okay? Because your skills were already listed up at the top. So now all you have to speak about is your experience in bullets. You don't have to separate them out. You don't have to spell out the skills, nothing like that, because they're already up at the top. It shares similar content and formatting practices, but the difference is it prioritizes your experience over your skills. As you gain more experience, the emphasis is going to be shifting again. But this is going to be really important to see here how it talks about the what did you do, how did you do it, and why or impact. If you have any measurable numbers that you want to put in here, this is the place to do it, because a traditional resume is more like a marketing brochure versus a federal government resume, which is just much more detailed and formal. Okay. Now, if you're looking for trying to figure out how you can get additional experience or hands-on project work, you can definitely go to our NU Career Services Experiential Learning webpage to help you gain a little bit more experience and hands-on project work that will help to build your resume up a little. Okay, so then there's a technology section. Technology sections are going to be placed in different places. In the federal resume, it's going to go under the additional qualifications, and then you'll put your technologies or technologies and specialized skills, and then you'll list them out by category again. Okay. The traditional resume, you're also going to list it out by category, but it's going to just go in a different place. It's going to go more towards the top by where the summary or the value proposition is. Okay, that's going to be highly important for technical roles. Now, if you are not in a highly technical role and you're maybe in a more executive level role, then the technical proficiency isn't going to be as important. They're looking more for leadership, strategic planning, those kind of things. They're looking for more leadership role oriented qualifications than they are, and skills than they are technology in many cases. So in that case, you might completely leave off the technical proficiency section altogether. Or if in the job description it does talk about certain technologies that you need to have experience in, you may want to go ahead and put that in your resume, but maybe towards the bottom of your resume. Okay, so it's really going to be dependent upon the role that you're applying for where or if you're going to put your technical proficiencies in your resume on a traditional resume. Okay. So for the additional sections, there's some different sections that you can potentially add to your resume, depending on a federal resume or a traditional resume. You could put job-related training on a federal resume, which translates to professional development on a traditional resume. This is if you have enough room on a traditional resume, because a traditional resume should only be no more than 2 pages. But professional development is great because it gives you credibility. It shows your dedication towards always making sure that you're up to date with best practices. It shows that you're immersed in your industry. So it's always a great thing to have on your resume it's if it fits within the 2 pages. Okay. Job-related training and then languages is important for federal resumes oftentimes. So it's if you have an additional language other than English, then you're going to want to include that also on your resume, on your federal resume. And any honors and awards that you had. So if you were, again, many of you are from the military sector. So what you're going to want to do is put your honors and awards in a section within that additional section. But what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you include why, because sometimes not all recruiters are from the military and they're not going to understand what those honors are. And so you might want to just briefly discuss why you received that honor or award. So then you can also put honors and awards on a traditional resume if it fits. But again, explain why it was that you included it. Typically, the two most common things that you're going to put on a traditional resume are professional development and professional memberships. You may put some volunteer experience in if you are using that to bridge a gap, or just in case, just to show that you're willing to go the extra mile. Again, that's only if you have room within those 2 pages. Federal resumes are a little longer. We'll go into that in a moment. Federal resumes have, again, a more formal tone, and it talks about the qualifications and results in more detail. Whereas with a traditional resume, a traditional resume is a summary of your experience in the most efficient way that you can explain it and concise way that you can explain it without leaving out important qualifying information. Okay, so you see how it's a little bit more wordy on the federal resume side. Managed and coordinated a team of 10 utilizing agile methodologies, resulting in a 20% increase in productivity. Whereas the traditional resume says managed a team to deliver X amount in revenue utilizing agile methodology. So it's a little bit shorter. Okay. The federal resume is, again, more detailed in its format and content, and it's 3 to 5 pages typically. Sometimes it goes a little over 5, but we try not to, because even federal recruiters that we've spoken with are now starting to not want to have to read 20-page resumes anymore. So, I mean, would you? So I would try to keep it five pages or less. 4 pages is great, but any more than 5 pages, it gets to be a little much. Now with a traditional resume, it's much more concise and streamlined. It's 1 to 2 pages in length. So here's that summary of differences. And again, I can share these slides with y'all so that you can have them to review later. But the header adds your federal specific details, the GS or the ES or the OS, any security clearances, specific job title, the GS level that you're applying for, the announcement number, and so on. Whereas with a traditional, it's primarily your contact information. And then the summary is your KSAs, your knowledge, skills, and abilities tailored towards the job description, the job announcement. And then with a traditional, it's either a value proposition or a summary, depending on your level of experience, but it's very concise. Okay. Recruiters really don't want to read through a lot of information. They want to get a quick snapshot of how you're qualified for the role, very quickly. And then they want to go down to your experience section to find the proof of that. Now with education, this is going to include your coursework, your projects, your honors, your GPAs, any clubs, any scholarships, anything like that. Whereas with traditional, it's still going to have your degree details and your and any optional honors, GPA and projects and clubs and so on. Just depending on your level of experience and if your GPA, of course, is above 3.5 in both cases, federal and traditional. Experience. With the federal, it's going to be detailed with your hours, your salary, and your supervisor information. Whereas a traditional, it's going to focus on impact, and it's very concise. You should really try to make sure that your bullets aren't more than, say, a line and a half, okay, in a traditional resume. For additional sections, those might be technology, detailed volunteer information, languages, job-related training, whereas with a traditional, it's going to be pretty similar. It's technologies, volunteer, professional development, or memberships. Unless it's a highly technical field, then your technologies would go at the top instead of in the additional sections. The tone for a federal resume is more formal and detailed, and the traditional is more marketing focused and concise. It's a summary. The length again is 3 to 5 pages for a federal and 1 to 2 pages for a traditional resume. So this breakdown basically highlights the key distinctions between the two resumes, demonstrating how they cater to vastly different application processes and expectations. So here are some common mistakes. Using a traditional format for federal resumes, not tailoring towards the job description for either one, leaving out critical details in federal resumes, and adding irrelevant information in traditional resumes that don't need to be there. Okay, so again, those are the common mistakes that we see all the time, all the time. Here are some final tips. First and foremost, carefully read that job description and follow the instructions of that job description. Okay, I can't say that enough. Very, very important. Follow the instructions of that job description. Tailor your content on your resume towards that job description or job announcement. And proofread thoroughly, because it's a complete turnoff to employers if you have a resume that's just written full of errors and mistakes and, you know, grammar and punctuation errors. Okay. But when they see one that doesn't have any of those things, they're like, ah, yes. Okay, so if you feel like you're going to need any assistance with your resume, there's a few ways that you can do this. You can go to joinhandshake.com/edu, click on the National University Career Center button, and then click appointments and follow the prompts from there. You can go to our website to take a look at some of the materials that we have there. You can email us at careerservices@nu.edu, or you can phone us at the telephone number listed, or you can drop your resume into the resume drop box at nu.edu if you would like written suggestions for how to enhance your resume. So just know, though, that we can't really help you if you haven't created a Handshake account. So please email us at careerservices@nu.edu or call us at the phone number listed for assistance if you're having any trouble whatsoever with registering. And now we will go on to the Q&A portion of the workshop. Any questions?
We did have a couple that got answered in the chat, but I wanted to call them out really quick. One of the questions was, will there be any opportunity to provide resume for tailoring or recommendations for formatting? And while there won't be individual resume tailoring or recommendations within the context of this workshop, National University does offer resume support and assistance to all of our active students and alumni for their lifetime. For our community members at large, we are looking at additional opportunities to provide some support. We don't have anything currently readily available, but we'll be announcing some things here soon for additional resources coming up.
I do have a sample federal resume if you want to see that.
If you want to share that, I think that would be great.
Okay, what happened to it? It just came up and now it disappeared.
Well, and while you're pulling that up, one of the other questions was, will there be a copy of this brief sent out? And we will be sending resources out within 48 hours of this presentation. So you'll get a copy of the slides as well as some sample resumes to help kind of get you started.
Okay, so this one was for emergency management. And you see how it had all of this information up here at the top? And then it had the your KSAs here, or your experience and your abilities here, and knowledge, and then your education and certifications here. The experience section is listed this way. Okay. On this one, we separated them out by skill. Okay. And then the additional qualifications section over here has the technologies, honors and awards, and volunteer work, which is spaced out too much. So that's kind of how that would look. It's very plain Jane. You really only want to use either Arial, and I don't really like Arial, so I'll use Calibri instead. And you can use Times New Roman, but it's so dated. So of course my preference is Calibri. But you could use one of those three. But like I said, I'll probably change it back to Calibri if you send me a resume in Arial or Times New Roman, just because that's my preference. Anyway, but that's how that one looks. I did have the other one up here as well.
We did get a question come in that says, I've seen some say that federal resumes could be 10 to 20 pages. Is there a true max?
At one time, they used to be able to be 10 to 20 pages. But what I'm hearing now from new recruiters is they really don't want them to be more than 5 pages. That's what I'm hearing now. That's their preference.
Wonderful. We also got, are there more workshops planned to help with the career journey? And I can answer that one. There will be additional workshops. Our goal is at least one per month. Though career services for our active students and alumni, we have regular cadence of workshops that are available. For this series specifically through the grant, our next one will be February 26th. And we'll be sharing the information out in our recap information as well. That will be focusing on networking, personal brand, and LinkedIn development. And then we'll continue to have series related to career development throughout that journey as we come on. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to follow National University on the Eventbrite series. And then for our active students and alumni through our Handshake portal, those announcements will be posted there as things become available.
I have a couple of questions. Is it okay to ask them? Or I'm not sure if I need to type them in the Q&A. This is Jennifer.
Yeah, you can ask it or you can type it.
So the question about are cover letters recommended, not recommended? And the other question is it important for applicants to often tweak their resume for each job they apply for? Because I've seen a lot where they use the same resume for different jobs and they don't adjust in small ways. They don't have to do their whole resume over again, but maybe just tweaking it a little bit to fit the requirements of the specific job you're posting for too is something I was wondering.
Right. Well, with federal jobs, you're going to have to customize your resume. It's going to take several hours probably. Um, Unfortunately, you're going to have to customize your resume to the job every time. But for a traditional resume, what you could do is you can look at, if you're looking for a particular type of role, you can get maybe, I don't know, 3 different job descriptions for that same role and kind of take a look and compare them to see what are the common patterns of key terms that are used there. So that way you have that already embedded into your resume so that you don't have to really change it a whole lot, just tweak it here and there for other future roles that you come across that might not have some of those keywords in it, as long as, of course, it's true to your actual background. But that's how a lot of people do that for the traditional roles or for the traditional resume, is they just take a look at other maybe like 3 different roles and look at the most common keywords amongst those 3 different job descriptions and incorporate that into their resume.
Thank you. And the cover letters,
And the cover letters.
are those important or?
Yes, they're important, and I'll tell you why. Because you're going to have 2 schools of thought here when you're talking to recruiters. Most recruiters are going to say that they don't read the cover letter, but the employer, the hiring manager, will. Okay, and even if the recruiter's not going to read it, and even if the employer is not going to read it, which 9 times out of 10 they will, it's still important to have because you don't know which employer is going to want it and which employer is not going to want it. So it's always going to be important as far as traditional resumes are concerned. Now, as far as federal resumes are concerned, you're going to always want to use a cover letter.
Thank you. And last question, sorry. Oh, my train of thought. I just lost my train of thought. Oh, what do you recommend as far as like if there's somebody like changing careers, so they don't have the experience? Do you
Okay.
have like tips for people who may be looking in a new field or don't have that experience for the job they're applying for?
Yeah, that was back over here. Let's see. Let me go back. If you go to our experiential learning website, you will see that there are a couple of places you can go to try to start getting hands-on experience. Forage is a company that we work with where you can do get some free virtual work experience. They have work experience programs for you. Parker Dewey has micro internships where they pay you to do a project. You bid on it. If they select you, you get paid to do that project. And it's just another way to build your resume. Now, if it's talking about like in technology, you have to know Python and things like that. Well, you may not have learned that in your coursework, but you really need to have some hands-on experience there. So it's really important to work on getting your certifications and again, doing some of these these experiential work programs here to gain and build that resume up. If you don't have the qualifications for the job, if it's a federal role, do not apply. It's just going to waste your time, and you're probably going to spend several hours trying to customize your resume, and it's just going to waste your time. It's going to waste their time, and we don't want that for you. We want you to be able to have a smooth transition. Think about perhaps even applying for jobs that bridge you into that role. Maybe something that's at a lower level to get you to where it is that you need to be to get that experience that you need. That's another approach. Volunteer work also might help. but it's very important to make sure that you do have the qualifications for federal jobs and 80% for traditional jobs. So I did see another one in here. It says, is it safe to assume that all announcements in USAJOBS.gov require a federal resume? Yeah, I would say that.
We also have, do you have tips for date gap and new career, which I know you addressed the new career piece a little bit. How about date gaps?
Date gaps. There's a couple of things you can do there. A lot of times when we have a career gap, it is often because we're doing something else at the time, right? It's not like you were just sitting on the couch watching TV and eating popcorn, right? You were doing something else. So it's important to make sure that you're incorporating some of that information as to what it was that you were doing during that time. Were you involved? Well, first of all, did you take a break for childcare? To become a caretaker. It's important to address those gaps because employers are going to be looking for those. Now, if it's only just a couple of months or so, it's probably not going to be as important. Employers aren't worried so much about a couple of months or so. But if it's an extended gap, like a couple of years or a year, then that's when you're going to want to talk about what did you do during that time? Did you take a planned leave to take care of your children? Did you, did you have to care for an elderly person? Did you decide that you were going to travel? And did you do any side work on the side? Did you, there's a lot of different things that you could have done. Were you a member of the PTO association? What was your involvement? Were you a member of your community homeowners association or property owners association? Whatever it was that you can show that was showing that you were being productive during that time, that's what you want to include. But it's got to be brief. It can't be really long. You can't have a really long explanation of it. Make it a one-liner, not anything more than one line. And try if you can to look at the transferable skills that you gain during that time as they relate to the roles that you're applying for now, if you can.
Wonderful. Should I include references directly in my federal resume, or is it better to list available upon request?
It's a good idea to do neither. Unless they specifically ask for references to be included in the resume, do not include references in the resume. And there's no need to put references available upon request. It's just wasted landscape on your resume.
Thank you. You had mentioned the kind of the work that you may have done during a gap. How can you effectively include volunteer work, especially if it demonstrates skills relevant to the federal position?
That's where I would include your volunteer work within your experience section. Give yourself a functional title of what it was that you did and put the name of the organization. Make sure that you put in parentheses it was volunteer work, and then discuss what it was that you did in relation to or transferable to the role that you're applying for.
Thank you. Don't see any other questions in there, but we'll give it just a moment. And while we're waiting to see if any additional questions come in, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that attended today. This is the first of our series, so there will be more coming down the pipeline. As I mentioned previously, our goal is to do at least one workshop per month, though there will be some months that there are multiple depending on what we're focusing on. Our goal is to focus on the whole human and the whole person. We're kicking off with our resumes, but we're also going to be looking at that networking, LinkedIn, and personal brand next month. Our hope is to look at some financial literacy and VA benefits in the future, as well as things related to internships and employment and the search around, or the support around searching. So definitely stay tuned. And if you haven't already, follow National University's Eventbrite if you're part of our community. And if you are a student or alumni, make sure that you go in and log into your Handshake account. We will send announcements out periodically, but Handshake is going to be where you get all of that great information, and you can see what's already on the docket and on the schedule for the upcoming year. We do have another question that says, what do you recommend to not have our age identified?
That's good. I would say to not have your age identified, it's important to list only your most recent 10 years of experience. Sometimes what I like to do though with a federal government role, because you can go down further in your experience, I'd say about 15 years. If you don't want them to know that you're of a certain age, typically ageism happens after 40, or it can happen after 40, is to what I've done, there's a couple of things you can do. You can put an additional related experience section if the work is highly relevant to the role and include that experience without the dates, or you can include that experience within the experience section, but then put pre and then don't go beyond that 15 years, 10 years on a traditional.
Awesome. And one of our members said, maybe I missed it. What is the best font to use when writing a resume?
Well, it depends on what type of resume you're writing. If you're writing a federal resume, typically the standard fonts, which would be, Times New Roman, Calibri, or dare I say Arial. And I don't like any of them except for Calibri. So that's just my preference. Now, as far as the traditional resume is concerned, you want to go with a resume font that is readable, whether or not the recruiter is reading your resume from a PC or a Mac. So it needs to be universally read, what does that mean? That the font doesn't change when it's read either way. Okay. We do have a handout on the different fonts that are acceptable. There are some like Trebuchet. There is Calibri. There's Palatino. I can't remember the Linotype is another one. If you really have to have the font that has the little feet, kind of like Times New Roman, if you really want that, you can use that, but I would use that sparingly, only in the headings. Because it's so much easier to read a straight line font than it is to read those fonts with the little tails on the end or the feet on the end. Because most recruiters nowadays are reading your resume online digitally. So it's easier to read digitally if it's a straight line font. So I can send a handout of some of the fonts that are universal fonts.
And then if I'm transferring from another federal agency, should I include details about my current federal pay grade, the GS level, and step?
If they say not to, then you don't have to. But if they do say, if they don't have any mention of that, then I would err on the side of being safe and tell them what it is, what that information is. Now, you always have this option next to your most recent supervisor to say, do not contact. So you can always put that in parentheses next to that supervisor if you're worried about them contacting your current supervisor. But you definitely want to put all the information that they're asking for. And if you don't want them to contact your current employer, then put do not contact.
Wonderful. Well, I think we will go ahead and pause questions for there. We will be sending out the resources within 48 hours of closing this, just to make sure we get everyone that's included. on our registrant list. I also included the links if you're an active student or alumni for our February workshop. And if you're part of our community, the Eventbrite link, it will be February 26th, 2025 at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This information will also be in the resources we send out, so you don't have to memorize it. If it gets lost, that's okay. But this one will be focused on networking, personal brand, and LinkedIn. And we just want to say thank you so much for joining us for the first workshop in this series. We are here to support you how we can, and we're really excited to learn and grow with you. I hope everyone has a good rest of your day, and we will see you soon.
Bye.